Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And today we are reviewing the new Disney animated movie Strange World, which was just released in theaters the day before Thanksgiving. And Dylan, would you like to tell the people what it's about?
Yeah, so Strange World. The legendary Clades are a family of explorers whose differences threaten to topple their latest and most crucial mission.
Yes. So, kind of an interesting movie in that I love animation. I love Disney animation, and I'm always looking forward to whatever new movie they come out that they have coming out. And I feel like this one's kind of flown under the radar a little bit. There seems to be significantly less hype around it than
Yeah.
we've seen for previous Disney releases. Like Encanto last year was a really big deal and caught on. Of course, that's a musical, and anytime you get a song or two and like a good soundtrack for a Disney musical, like that's going to live on longer than their non-musical movies. But even compared to other recent stuff that they've done, like Raya and the Last Dragon came out last year, and I feel like this has less hype than that did, or something like Big Hero 6 or Ralph Breaks the Internet, other non-musical movies they've made recently. And they went back to theaters for this release. But to me, more than any movie they've released recently, this kind of felt like something they could have just dumped on Disney Plus and it would have been fine, especially compared to like Encanto last year that really felt like it could use. It was in theaters for a little while, but I think it went very quickly to Disney Plus. And maybe they'll do the same thing with Strange World, but the theatrical release for this one just seems a little muted, and not that many people seem to be talking about it or as aware of it as we're used to.
Yeah, I agree. I hadn't even really heard of it until recently. I feel like I hadn't seen any trailers or anything for it. And yeah, I think that it does kind of have that feel of something that could have gone directly to streaming. And I think that just comes from, I don't know, it just feels a little uh, simple and kind of, I don't know, not like hollow, but it just like, I don't know, it doesn't have, it didn't like pull me in and feel as, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It just
Well, I
didn't pull
think,
me in the way the
yeah,
other Disney movies do.
I think the story felt small
Yeah.
in many ways, but particularly, first off, I should say, I think the first 5 minutes of this movie are the best thing they've done since Moana.
Yeah, the
Um,
first 5 minutes are great.
I think they're phenomenal. There's a little prequel that you get, and it really gets you into the mood of the kind of heroes from yesteryear, sort of
Yep.
like sky pilot adventurers from like the 20s and 30s and stuff, like that old feel that like Up kind of has that feel at the beginning of it as well, with the sort of flashback, like black and white
Yep.
sequence. And Strange World does it really, really well here. And then after that, it kind of, you and I talked after we saw this together that it sort of felt like a lot of the budget went to how this looks, which it is an
Yes.
interesting looking movie. But even like right away after we kind of get the 25 years later, after the little prequel that we get, there's there's a line that is just like super lazy exposition right away. And that was pretty much when I was just like, oh God, this is not a good sign for like the writing and kind of things to come, at least as far as the tone of this movie goes. And it
Yeah.
kind of continued from there, where especially the first half hour, this movie just felt like it wouldn't hold still and it was like sprinting to something.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
what it ended up sprinting to wasn't necessarily that much more interesting either.
hmm Yeah, I felt like there was just too much, like you said, just the way the dialogue was written, and just the whole first act felt like, I don't know, not very creative, and like I was kind of anxious to like, okay, like let's get this thing on the road. Like, we're like 30 minutes in and we haven't seen anything strange. It's just you on your farm, and like the way they talk to each other, like the son is like, but father, da 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 da. Well, okay, son. Like people don't talk to each other like that, like all the
Yeah.
time. Like,
I guess we didn't
like,
have watches on or anything, or we weren't checking the time, but I felt like that stuff on the farm was like 10, 15 minutes tops.
God, I felt
And
like we
then,
were at that freaking farm forever. I was just like,
okay,
let's go.
it just sort of felt like because we get that 25-year jump, and this is all within like the first act of the movie, so we're not really spoiling anything here.
Hmm.
Um, it kind of felt like, okay, we're introduced to this world that has like no resources and no money, and then all of a sudden they do, and then all of a sudden it's in danger and they need to save
Hmm.
it. And I felt like we got all of that in like 15 minutes.
Hmm.
And it sort of never felt like we were able to like get our footing in what this world is actually normally like.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then we go into the, if you've seen the trailer, the strange world that they find themselves in when they're exploring for kind of a solution to save their own world.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what we end up getting is a very on the nose and obvious allegory or metaphor or whatever you want to call it for climate change.
Hmm.
And I think, it's if we're going to make a movie that simply teaches kids about climate change, like cool, I think those should exist.
Hmm.
But that's kind of the only real sticking point that I felt in this movie were like the very obvious themes. Other than that, like the pacing's weird and the characters are generally forgettable. And outside of the first 5 minutes, it's not that funny. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where I'm sitting with this. I thought it was just sort of meh outside. I could rewatch those first 5 minutes like 20 times though.
Yeah, I agree that it wasn't that funny. I felt like a lot of the jokes landed pretty flat or were just kind of like stuff we've seen before, kind of very predictable directions with the humor. And I guess I just feel like it didn't, the balance between being fun for kids to watch and being like still entertaining or, engaging for adults, it just didn't have much of the latter. It
Yeah,
just
it's
felt
definitely yeah.
like it's set up as it definitely could have more for adults, but then it just over and over again it just kind of takes the easy convenient route when it comes to like plot or just like characters. And then like when the blue dude shows up who's clearly like meant to be like the cute side character that kids will love, I was just like,
Yeah.
oh god, here we go. And then a character in the movie actually comments on that, and it's like, okay, at least they're a little self-aware but not enough
Yeah,
to
but do we
really
need them to
up
be for
the
something like
quality.
this?
Yeah.
That just felt a little weird, and I kind of there was an eye roll or two at that point. But yeah, I kind of to your point of how this mostly just feels like it's for little kids,
Hmm.
and that's a weird feeling for a movie that kind of focuses on the father-son relationship between like a 40 and a 65-year-old man,
Yeah, yeah.
and then the youngest person is like 16.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it's a little bit of a weird mix
Yeah.
because the first 5 minutes, not saying that kids won't like it, but like that's a level of humor and there's some awareness there and some references to things
Yep.
that adults will get and enjoy. And then
Yep.
after that, it's all kind of this tone of this sort of frenetic, quick, easy humor that
Hmm.
kids under 10, I think, will appreciate. I don't think this is something that like nobody's going to enjoy or anything
Yeah.
like that. But there's just a feeling that I got almost right away, like right away after the little prologue, that just instantly felt like, oh, this is just kind of more minor Disney fare
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
we're used to. It just sort of, I don't know, everything about it felt like they weren't putting all of their eggs in this basket, which
Yep.
for a
Yep.
studio like Disney Animation, that's the longest running and just kind of even with Pixar still, there's just something about a new Disney movie that runs all the way through like even most of our parents' lives.
Yeah.
And they've got some A+ movies and they've got some C- movies where it felt like they kind of half-assed them. And this
Hmm.
one definitely felt like they weren't putting everything into it.
Yeah, and just I mean, just even coming down to the writing, I just felt like they looked at it and they were like, well, if we have crazy animation and it's just this colorful, crazy world, like people will watch it just because of that, and we can
Right.
just have a very basic, like not like I feel like there weren't very many rewrites for this script. I feel like they submitted like
Hmm.
one version and Disney was like, yeah, that'll work.
That
Like,
that is kind of the way it feels. Like just very, yeah, we're done.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, some of the jokes and stuff just weren't landing, which is too bad because I feel like on the uh, visual front, I mean, I feel like it did look pretty incredible most of the time. I mean, there was definitely certain scenes that were like, oh my God, like, look at how far animation has come. I really liked the cool kind of glowy electrically charged like plants. I liked most of the stuff in the strange world with like the creatures and just the like the everything, like you said, everything kind of looked like it was a koosh ball.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the
and
koosh
like
ball aesthetic, that felt
the
like
koosh
somebody just playing around with one in the room where they were kind of deciding what this should look like.
yeah, like I thought that was cool, and then there's kind of a twist towards the end that also leads to like a cool visually, like a couple, like a cool idea, and then the way they executed it was interesting. um but it's just, I don't know, interesting environments alone aren't
Yeah,
enough to keep me engaged,
right. Just
unfortunately.
not much here from the character side, which is disappointing because we've got a voice cast with Dennis Quaid, Jake Gyllenhaal, Gabrielle Union, Lucy
Mm-hmm.
Liu.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's some big names in here, and they're not bad or anything, but everything's just very kind of one note, and it's kind of exactly what you see right away, and they never really bring it into a much more interesting space, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and Jake did fine. I think he was doing the best he could with the script. Um, I mean, I thought
Yeah,
he was,
the voice work is fine.
yeah, voice work is fine, but yeah, and then I don't know, yeah, just I guess only other thoughts was the father son thing. I mean, I've definitely seen it done better in many other movies. It just felt like it was kind of just, one kind of hit the nail on the head, like moral followed by another.
Yeah, the whole script felt like they were just kind of following a template and never really wandered from it. And so
Hmm.
there's nothing like technically wrong with it. It's just not that interesting.
Yeah, well said. I think that's about as good as you can put it right there.
Yeah. So unless you have anything else, I think we can jump into the stars.
No, let's do it.
All right. We'll be right back with our star rating. Okay.
Okay.
I can go first if
Yeah,
that works for you.
go for it.
Uh, I'm going to give this a 2.5. I mean, it's fine. I think little kids will enjoy it. But beyond that, I don't think there's a lot of staying power here for a studio with I think it's like 60, 61 animated movies now. This is
Hmm.
definitely not going to live on and be kind of included in the list of those classics that people love to revisit almost every year. So a
Yeah.
little disappointing, but not the worst thing I've seen all year. So yeah.
Hmm. Yep, I'm going to echo that, and I am also giving this a 2.5. It was okay. I was
Yep.
definitely disappointed. I think this type of story had a lot of potential to be really good if they could have had the actual character work be better, and if like there was a setup there for this to be a really interesting kind of like Up was, where
Yeah,
it's like,
it's a good concept.
yeah, old school adventure vibe, family dynamics, and I just felt like this was like Up, but without the good script, like
Yeah,
just the locations and the animation, like, but
right.
none of the actual like weight, and so it just felt very hollow and just, I don't know, yeah. I was disappointed, but there was still I'm glad that we saw it in theaters because it was still visually very impressive and fun. And once they get to the strange world, like I at least was like, well, at least there's pretty scenery to look at. Like,
Yeah, for
the
sure. It was
this,
never not interesting looking, so that did kind of hold my attention all the way through, but that's not what you need to be able to revisit this. You need a good family dynamic and memorable characters and kind of a better
yeah,
core story than this has.
Yeah, for sure. So, yep, 2.5 as well. A little disappointing, but still glad that we went and saw it, just so we
Yeah.
know. And then now I can just never have to watch it again, probably in my whole
Yeah,
life.
I'm curious to see how this does in theaters and then eventually on Disney Plus once it gets there.
Yeah, it might
'Cause
do better on streaming.
I feel like it's gonna do better on streaming. I don't know. I mean, Disney movies always do really well over Thanksgiving weekend. They've been kind of the one, like one of the few that's just sort of been always bankable, and you kind of know.
Hmm.
I mean, some of them blow up, but they never really tank.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't know. I'm curious to see if this is maybe their first flop in a long time.
Hmm. All right. Well, is it your turn to put a wrap on the show?
It is.
All right, take it away, Nate.
For years, we operated under the belief that we could continue consuming our planet's natural resources without consequence. We were wrong.